see, doubting the JFK assassination is okay. Doubting 9/11, it's already on the edge. Doubting the moon landing, you're a conspiracy theorist. So I think they stopped short of that to avoid being criticized as a conspiracy theorist. I would say to Trump, get rid of Musk. I wouldn't say anything to Musk because he wouldn't listen. But I would say to Trump, get rid of him. He's more bad than good, I think, in the bottom line.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
So it's February 2025. Welcome to Podcast. My name is Rico Brouwer. And you just heard John Kennedy in his 1961 address calling for the United States going to the moon. Now, I don't typically start with a fragment like that, but my guest is Massimo Mazzuro. Welcome.
Mazzucco, thank you. Mazzucco.
Oh, Mazzucco, excuse me.
That's okay.
Rico
Brewer, right?
Yeah, in Dutch it would be Brouwer. That's
Brouwer.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Good. Okay, you're the creator of a couple of documentaries. One in particular, American Moon, and we're going to talk about that because I invited you because I saw the new president in the United States talk about Mars, and I have a clip prepared for that as well.
And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars.
So that's Trump.
Can I laugh now? Or do I need to wait?
Well, if you laugh now, you're superimposed on Elon Musk, who was going, yeah, we're going to Mars. Okay, so I'll introduce you in a moment. But your first reaction when you heard Trump say that in his inauguration speech, what was?
My first reaction was my eye was caught to the right, looking at the screen. To the right of Trump, there was Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. And when he said that, they couldn't help but laughing. I mean, they went like that a couple of times. So I think that comments enough. You know, if this comes from another president of the United States, I think it's a commentary good enough. In any case, nothing is impossible in life, but probabilities are really on the lower end in this case, definitely.
Okay, I looked up who is Massimo Mazzucco. Wikipedia says, an Italian filmmaker who's produced documentary films such as American Moon, The New American Century, and Cancer, The Forbidden Cures. Mazzucco is also the administrator of, here goes my Italian, Luogo Comune.
Luogo Comune.
There you go. I have an image for that as well. So people can review that in a moment. In an Italian news site concentrating mostly on the September 11 World Trade Center attacks. Would you agree with that?
This page was written 15 years ago. At the time, Luogo Comune was the one place in Italian for discussion on September 11. After that, the September 11 debate pretty much died out because everything that needed to be said has been said from one side and from the other. And we started looking into other so-called conspiracies or controversial issues. And my website has become actually a 360 degrees a conspiracy site. I put it in quotations, of course, but that's what they call it. And we analyze problems like, for example, the Kennedy assassination or the moon landings or anything else, or the assassination of Robert Kennedy, any historical controversy that has been big enough to be discussed for more than 10 years. And they're all there on the website, yes. Unfortunately for your audience, the website is all in Italian, but I think now with automatic translation, you can do miracles, the website.
Yeah, indeed. Also, I watched parts of your previous interviews on the matter in Italian and French that way, because I don't speak French nor Italian. Okay, you created American Moon. My first question to you would be, how would you describe the movie American Moon to the audience?
Well, let me give you a little bit of backstory. In my life, when I was young, between like 25 and 40, I was a fashion photographer. I was a professional photographer, very high level, high standard. I would work for magazines in Europe, in Germany, in Australia, in the States, in France, everywhere. I was pretty good. And especially I was good with the technique of photography at the time. At the time, of course, there was no digital cameras, there was all film. And you had to really learn your trade if you wanted to make a good living with photography. After that, I stopped. I started making films. I gave up photography in the end of the 90s. And I started making fiction films. I made a few. I made 4 or 5. In the meantime, by the year 2000, NASA started to publish all the complete series of the photographs of the so-called moon landings. Let's call them the NASA missions pictures, the Apollo pictures. And when I started looking at them, with the eye of the photographer, I could recognize in those pictures the same exact problems that I would have in a studio when I tried as a fashion photographer to recreate the sunlight. When you want to save money, you don't want to go to the Maldives to shoot bathing suits because there's not enough budget. You go in a studio, you take a big 3 meters by 3 meters box of sand, you behind the girl, the model, you put a back screen, a plexiglass screen, you project a picture of the sea, of the Maldives behind, and you light the girl with a very powerful, strong light that resembles the sunlight. And that's how you do the Maldives at home, when in a rainy day in Amsterdam, you can do that if you want, okay? There's a couple of problems though. The quality of the light of the sun cannot be imitated because the sun has direct rays traveling because it's so far distance, 150 million kilometers, that its rays are practically parallel to each other. So the light has a certain quality that in studio you cannot replicate. But most importantly, when I took those pictures in the studio with the sand back, the front, with the girl on the sand and the picture in the back, across the entire frame of the picture, you have a straight line going across, which is where the sand ends and where the picture begins. There's no way to merge the sand, which is in my studio, with the image. You always have this straight line. When I looked at the NASA pictures, 99.9% of the pictures had this strange line going all across. When you had a foreground very near, with sand and stones and holes in that, and this line, and in the distance, you had the mountains, the moon mountains. That to me was a red bell. It started to ring a bell. What I did then, when I saw those pictures, I called a very famous photographer, somebody who has just passed away a month ago. His name was Oliviero Toscani. He's the famous photographer who made the Benetton campaign worldwide, whom I had worked for when I was young. I was an assistant to him. I was in good terms. I was a friend with him. So I called him up and says, Oliviero, what did you think the first time you saw the Apollo mission pictures? And he replied to me, and I quote him, I thought that if they asked me to do them, I would have done a much better job.
Yeah.
This was the answer from a professional. This is not a conspiracy theorist. He, in fact, thought, for some reason, that the pictures were weird, but we did go to the moon. Then I interviewed him, and you can see the interview on the film, and he explains clearly why those pictures cannot have been taken on the moon with a single source of light, which is the sun. There had to be additional lights in those pictures, and that's what the eye of the trained photographer sees immediately, and that's what started me making the film.
What the greatest appeal of the movie to me, and I've now seen it 3 times, which is kind of an achievement because it's 3.5 hours long.
Yes.
Good for you, because you didn't skip any detail. You did them all. Whatever my impression, whatever you found on controversies with the Apollo program, you meticulously dove into those and tried to analyze them. But you took the original footage as a starting point.
Yes.
It's just what NASA put out there, and then assess that with professionals. Well, this is what we see. What do we see? No hypothesis or no conspiracy theories or what have you. No, it's just this is the content. How does that work as a filmmaker? Now, if this was a fake, because that's what we're talking about, the Apollo program not having really been not that really haven't been on the moon in the Apollo program, then they must have recruited a filmmaker also. But they couldn't have recruited the best one, the most famous one. Who would have done this then? You think?
There's a big, very, very common theory that Stanley Kubrick helped to produce those images, so the films and the pictures. By the way, when we say images, the pictures, the moving images of the cameras that we see on the moon, allegedly from the moon, the live pictures, TV pictures, and the photographs belong to the same set. So, because the details are identical. So whenever you see a photographer in the moon, the astronaut clicking a certain picture, and you see him in the video, and then you see the picture that he took, that is the same set. It's not two separate situations. So either everything was done on the moon, or everything was done in the studio.
Okay.
Now, what was your question again? Sorry.
No, you answered it already. So I'd like to stick to the facts. But there has to have been a professional filmmaker, a part of this crew.
Yeah, so obviously, the Stanley Kubrick, we're talking about Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
So there is a general idea that Stanley Kubrick helped to produce both, the whole fake studio, basically. I personally don't believe, and I know you're going to laugh about this, but I don't think it was necessary to hire a Stanley Kubrick to do such a shitty job. I apologize. But that's exactly what those pictures are. They are not a good job. All you needed to do is have a tight crew, obviously, a NASA military crew that was trained enough to set up lights and do tricks, but you do not need a Stanley Kubrick to do that. The mistakes in those pictures and those images are so evident that I cannot think. I would be criticizing one of my heroes, Stanley Kubrick, if he did that.
Exactly.
He could have not done that junk.
And also, I encourage people to go watch this documentary, and you can see it. And I have questions on that later also, but you can see it without paywall on YouTube, so it's available. Go review that thing, and you will be taken through the 60s. Starting point, John F. Kennedy saying we're going to the moon within 10 years. And then they took 7, 8, 9 years preparing for that. So also preparing how that's going to look, how the pilots, how the astronauts is going to behave in that environment. So they've had years and years of preparing also with fake sets just for preparation purposes. So they trained themselves.
My opinion is halfway in between. I am convinced that initially NASA was really trying to go to the moon. When Kennedy said, let's go, and the director of NASA, Webb, said, we can do it, they meant it. They thought they could. Americans, they always think they can do everything. Like now, we're going to Mars. Okay, sure, we're going to Mars. Until you start putting your hands on the real problems, of course, then you think you can do everything. In the first 4 or 5 years, they actually tried. The more they were getting closer to the deadline of 69, because Kennedy, we will go before the end of the decade is over. So December 69 would have been the latest. The more they were getting closer, the more problems they were accruing on the technical side. The Saturn launch missile wasn't working. The second stage had problems. The command module had problems. Everything had problems. The closer they got to them, the more they started to realize that they would probably never make it. But at that point, they had already built inside NASA an entire simulation structure that was actually used to simulate, to get the astronauts trained to go to the moon. So the simulation sets were real. They were meant for them to go for real. They had an entire process of filming the LEM detaching from the capsule, from the command module, from inside the camera with a background that looked like the moon. It was all there. They were exercising the whole process of going and coming back in the studio. I believe that at some point, which is actually in January 67, and I will tell you why in a moment, at that point, somebody said, guys, we're never going to make it, but we have this great simulation system. The images looks great. Nobody's going to say that it's not real because nobody's ever been to the moon anyway. So why don't we just use the simulation sets and pretend that we go? So I think that the first part, 61 to 67 was they meant to go. From 67 on, they decided they couldn't. And in fact, it's very weird. In 67, the director of NASA, Webb, resigned with no apparent reason. I mean, imagine, this is the man who insisted with Kennedy to go to the moon, who brought to Kennedy the moon project in 61, who made sure that he could raise enough money in Congress for NASA to have all the money they needed to go to the moon. And in 67, 2 years before the big success of his life, he resigns and takes on a private life. That is very telling. It's very important. It means he did not want to be involved in the fakery. Once he realized that this was going to be faked, he probably said, I'm not going to be part of it. I'm resigning.
Good for him. I noticed that this documentary must have been made by a filmmaker, that is your expertise, even though you saved that part of the content for the last half of the documentary. It starts with describing that political climate, the climate in the 60s of Kennedy engaging the space race that wasn't there, or so the documentary says. However, the Russians did presumably also go to the moon and collected some moon dust, although not manned in a manned session.
I think the Russians have been very honest. At some point in 63, when Kennedy realized, when they were telling Kennedy that this going to the moon thing is not that easy, as you put it, in 61, he made a proposal to Khrushchev to go to the moon together. There's a public address when he say, why don't we and the Russians go to the moon together? This is such a human mission from humanity. Why not first put the forces together? And Khrushchev replied, at the present time, we do not wish to put the life of our cosmonauts at risk. We do not believe it is possible to go, but we certainly will sit down and watch the Americans do it. And most importantly, Khrushchev said, we will watch how the Americans return from the moon. Because one thing is to land that thing on the moon, and one thing is to come back with it. Because with a single engine taking off vertically with two people standing inside, I mean, it's really not even, it's like balancing something on the tip of a pencil, okay? So that idea itself was very, very, very extreme. But he said, we'll watch it, we'll applaud you if you'll make it. So now the question, I'm sorry, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but it's an obvious question that comes now to everybody's mind. And it is, well, then, if the Russians knew that the Americans did never go, why didn't they call it? Why didn't they denounce it, as a fakery? After all, they were in competition. There are many reasons why I believe they would not denounce it. First of all, they would have looked like the losers. If you lose, have you ever seen those dictators in Africa when they lose the elections and they claim that the election has been botched? Oh, of course it's been botched. You just lost, Shut up. That's basically the reaction you get. So imagine the whole world sees on live television the landing on the moon. Imagine if the Russians say it's not true. I mean, they're going to be laughed at because they just lost the race to the moon. They're the losers. So that was one reason. Most important reason, though, I believe, is that behind the facade, there were already a lot of interchange of scientists and scientific data and technology between the Russians, the Soviets at this time, and the Americans to go in orbit together. The famous project Apollo-Soyuz, the joint project Apollo-Soyuz, was launched in 72. And at the time, it was already in the works when when Apollo went apparently to the moon. So if the Russians had denounced the Apollo missions as fake, the entire project together that was already happening would have collapsed, of course. The Russians needed the technology. They needed the help of the Americans with the technology, which they didn't have at the time. And most importantly, there were a lot of economic agreements going on behind closed doors about sales of oil and all that. And a lot of political reasons are there that makes you say that there was no interest in the Russians to denounce the fakery. But most importantly, the whole world would have laughed at them because obviously they are the ones who lost the race. They cannot say, it's fake. If anybody is a third party said it's fake, okay, maybe we can talk about it. But if the losers say it's fake, nobody's going to believe them.
Next time I talk to a Russian official, I've only talked once to the Dutch ambassador here, the Russian ambassador to the Netherlands. I will pose that question because I do not feel that it was pride. It was more. I suppose it was more. What's the benefit of calling them out? Let them do the fraud. We're busy with more important stuff.
And
But
the Russians might have had their own frauds to hide. For example, there's something sketchy about the Gagarin flight that is not so clear what happened there. So they might have had their own secrets that the Americans knew. So maybe you don't want to go there from either side.
So it must please you then to learn that not only is Trump going to Mars, there might be a new film project in it for you, but also he is starting the creation of the task force on the declassification of federal secrets. Did you hear?
Yes.
I have a fragment of that ready here also. Let's listen to that.
Okay.
Today is a great day for transparency in America because today I'm proud to announce the creation of the Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets. This task force will be a part of the House Oversight Committee and led by the very talented and persistent Congresswoman from Florida, Anna Paulina Luna.
We'll be conducting investigations into the following: the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King, unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UAPs, unidentified submerged objects, also known as USOs, the Epstein client list, the origins of COVID-19, and the 9/11 files.
Now that must have caught your attention. They're going to do 9/11. No?
In my website, we talked about nothing else for a week, of course.
Yeah, in Italian. So if you could, so how did you discuss it on your website?
Well, originally, we're very skeptical. You know, all my users, they've been users for 20 years. They're very skeptical. We're not easily fooled by statements. And when Trump said already during the political campaign that he would declassify everything, we went, yes, of course. Right. That's just, the typical promise that you make as a candidate, and then you forget about it. In fact, Trump had already made that promise in 2016 to declassify the JFK files, and then he didn't. So nobody really believed that. When you hear the speech by Anna Paulina Luna, the one you just showed, it's very different. She doesn't just say, we will declassify generically a few things. She meant specifically in that press conference, she said specifically about the Kennedy assassination in particular, she said that from what, I'm quoting her now, she says, from what I have seen, the original theory of the single shooter was failed, was a fallacy, was false. And I believe that there were two shooters in Dallas. Now, it seems like a very small statement to make. Okay, well, 1, 2, no. It makes the whole difference in the world, because the entire official story of Dallas, of the Dallas assassination, the Kennedy assassination, is that there was only one shooter, Oswald, and that he was a communist, and he hated Kennedy, and he killed him, and that's the end of the story. While in fact, we know now, because many people have spoken already before their death, many people have confessed in their deathbeds. So we know now that it was an operation that was acted together by the mafia and the CIA, both for their own reasons. The mafia had reasons because Robert Kennedy was after them as an attorney general, and the CIA, of course, because of the Bay of Pigs, mostly. So mafia and CIA got together, and they needed to create a patsy, and the patsy was Oswald, and Oswald was obviously arrested and immediately killed, so he could not tell the truth. The fact that she says there were two shooters means that the entire official story is, again, I'm sorry for the wording, bullshit. And this is very important because it shows that to what extent would the American government go, or any government would go to hide the truth if it's inconvenient. So it would be a very, very, very big lesson about all the other conspiracies that are outstanding right now. Because if we realize, we have to accept that the official story of JFK was covered up, then why not 9/11? Why not the moon landings? And so So the statement was very accurate, and it means that they mean business. They want to go to the end of this. She would have never said, I believe that there were two shooters, if they did not intend to uncover the truth on the Kennedy assassination.
So you're hopeful there. My next question
Yes.
would be, I mean, your American Moon documentary poses a question, and what you try to achieve is that people think for themselves and assess the pros and the cons and do their own journalism. That's what you want to happen. But you would not have made this documentary if you were not convinced that this thing is fraudulent, that it was a fake. Now,
Right.
yeah, if you're convinced of that, shouldn't Ms. Luna have included the Apollo missions in her list of disclosures then?
Well, if it were up to me, yes, I would have certainly included them. But I guess that depends on what everybody thinks and what has been a conspiracy. Maybe in the Trump administration, they're convinced that they did go to the moon. So they don't consider that a valid point. I don't know that. More accurately, I would say that I think there is a reason why she did not mention the moon. Because if you mention the moon fakery, you become immediately a conspiracy theorist. You become easily attacked. If he had said, we will investigate the moon landings, Trump would have taken the sticker, they would have put a sticker on him as a conspiracy theorist, they would have made fun of him, and he would kind of lose credibility on the other investigations, I think, because the moon is a little more extreme. See, doubting the JFK assassination is okay. Doubting 9/11, it's already on the edge. Doubting the moon landing, you're a conspiracy theorist. So I think they stopped short of that to avoid being criticized as a conspiracy theorist. But I'm telling you, there's enough there that I'll be very happy for the next 10 years to watch documents come out.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can always contact Paulina Luna later and says, what about the moon? You know, while you're at it, take a look at the moon as well. That can always be done in a second time.
I have not researched this, so apologies. But is she Italian? The name is Italian.
Excuse me?
Is,
Paulina Luna, she's no, South American.
oh, South America. I wouldn't know. Okay, sorry.
The father was American Jew, and the mother was, I think, Mexican.
Ah.
And her actual last name was, I don't remember, but it was a Jewish name. She changed that into the name of the mother after the father became an alcoholic. She took the last name.
How would you know all these things?
Yes, because there was another conspiracy theory that Paulina Luna is hiding her real Jewish name. In fact, it's true. I mean, she changed it. She's not hiding it. She's not. If you look her up on Wikipedia, will tell you that her name was Bauenberger. I don't know. I'm just making up the Jewish name.
Okay.
And I believe because the father became alcoholic and had a very bad history, that I think she changed her name last name into her mother's name.
Let's move back into the topic of our conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, you just said the Russians would not out the Americans if they could, because they would be the laughingstock of the world. Now, if you dig into the JFK assassination, Martin Luther King assassination, or even 9/11, you would maybe out CIA. I don't know what the story is, but that would be. But if you expose the moon landings for a fake, the United States would become the laughingstock of the world. Trump he would never go there. He wants to make America great again, not be.
Also, he has to protect Elon Musk, who has projects to go to Mars. So he could certainly, I didn't think about this. He could certainly not say, we'll investigate the moon landings, while at the same time he's saying he's going to Mars.
Exactly.
Because people say, excuse me, shouldn't we go to the moon first, then before we talk about anything else? Yeah, I didn't think about that.
The USSR, so Soviet Union, now Russian Federation, has been to the lunar surface and retrieved soil samples. They also created pictures through their 1970 Luna 17 and Lunokhod 1 mission. My question to you is, have you tried to incorporate those missions and images also in your research?
Only in one case, when the issue of the lunar rocks comes up. The lunar rocks is one of the elements used by those who believe in the official version, those who believe NASA. They say that one of the proofs that we went to the moon is the lunar rocks. How can we have rocks that are different from rocks on Earth unless we went to the moon? And one of the answers is they could have easily picked them up by an unmanned machine, like a rover, like the Russians did. And this is when I make the example of Lunokhod and how the Russians did actually retrieve samples of the moon without need to sending a man to the moon.
Yeah, okay. Your documentary, American Moon, you divided that in 4 parts, really. And first one going into the political situation of the time, and then the pro arguments and the against arguments, and then the photography, and then ending with the conclusion. I would say very well constructed. How was it received? Because you just said if you do the moon hoax theory, you're the laughingstock and your career ends. How was your documentary received?
I published it in 2019 on July, which was actually the 50th anniversary of the moon landing.
Yeah, to the day.
And in the beginning, I was the laughingstock, definitely. I mean, I was not a laughingstock. People already knew that I was convinced we didn't go to the moon. It's not like I gave them a surprise. I've been talking about the fake moon landings for 10, 15 years now. But, making the film is different. You're making a statement. And in the beginning, they tried to attack me on television. For example, they say, ha, 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 there's someone who thinks that we didn't. But now that the time is passing, and now that every year the new missions to the moon keep getting moved forward,
Yeah.
Initially, we were supposed to go back to the moon in 2016 under Trump. Actually, under Obama already. There was a Constellation program that was meant to go back to the moon, and we never made. Then Trump came in 16, and he never made it, and he was supposed to go and he never made it. Then it was going to be a Biden project, and Biden came and went, and we didn't go to the moon. Now Trump is back, and they're already pushing the Artemis 3, which is the return, so-called return of astronauts to the moon. They're pushing it past 2027. So the problems are so many that people are starting to say, well, excuse me, how was it so easy 50, 55 years ago to go with no technology whatsoever? They started from scratch. When Kennedy made that announcement that you showed in the beginning, they hadn't even sent a man in suborbital flight, not orbital. Not even. It was like shooting a cork into the sky, and the cork would fall somewhere. They didn't even have done that. And yet, from 61 to 69, with the technology of basically the computer power I have in my watch now, that's what they had. They managed to go to the moon starting from scratch. Now that we have a technology which is probably 1,000, if not 100,000 times more efficient, we cannot seem to be able to even get close.
So
Suddenly the radiation has become a problem. Now suddenly, when they sent the Artemis 1 around the moon a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, they actually put mannequins inside the command module filled with sensors to monitor the radioactivity. The 2 mannequins were called Helga and Zohar, and they were filled with sensor everywhere just to record the radioactivity the radiation received by the astronauts throughout the whole trip. Why in heaven would you need to measure that radioactivity if you have already been 6 times to the moon in the 60s? You would already know that it's not dangerous, or that it is, one of the two.
Yeah, okay.
But there's no need.
Fair enough, but that's more circumstantial. I would argue then that tortoises have been sent on the same trajectory and came back alive. But you want the date, you want the measure. I mean,
I know about the tortoise. I wasn't there to watch in what condition the tortoise came back.
No, I tried to look.
I was told that she was fine and that she went on holidays the next summer. I'm not sure about that. We don't know.
No. I just said they were alive. Actually, I engaged ChatGPT and Grok in my research just to see how they would respond to questions that you try to answer with your documentary. And ChatGPT said that we went back to the moon late last year. And then I said, well, it's 2025 now. You are correct. We're going to go this year.
I apologize for the mistake.
So that was fun.
Everybody, of course, when ChatGPT came out, everybody went with my 42 questions They immediately went to ChatGPT and to the others, But what happens is that really artificial intelligence is just a big data collector. It's just a huge Wikipedia which encompasses all the Wikipedias, everything that has been said about the moon, and gives you a summary.
Yeah.
It has no intelligence. It's just a powerful machine
Exactly.
that can chew up and spit back data that has already been put online. So, of course, the answer is going to be that.
Your
there's no
documentary,
other-
you put it out in 2019.
Yes.
I assume it took more than a year in the making.
Three.
Yeah, so it's 8 years down the road. So what I try to find engaging ChatGPT is not doing my own research, but just see whatever is out there on the internet. Did we learn anything new since this documentary came out? Did you learn anything
moon?
new in the past 8 years?
About the moon landing. No. A few more problems. People have spotted out a few more problems that I had not considered. One very interesting one is, for example, that in one of the shots of the astronauts on the moon, the astronaut is banging a hammer on, to stick some stick in the ground, and suddenly you see the hammer. You hear where you're not supposed to hear anything, because if you are in
You heard the hammer.
vacuum, there is no sound. Now you have the explanation by the debunkers. Yeah, no, that's true. It's the sound that is coming through the arm, and the vibration becomes. They have found a few more things like that. Okay. But basically, I mean, if you want, Rico, if you want to summarize the entire problem of the hoax of the moon, there is one argument that cannot be defeated. All the 6,000 plus photographs allegedly taken on the surface of the moon with the Hasselblad cameras, with the big format cameras, none of the film has even the smallest damage from radiation. Film gets damaged by radiation immediately. If anybody has used photography, older generations have used photography in the past, you remember that if you went through airport scanner, you would not put your camera with the film inside through the scanner, because even just 2 seconds of X-rays would destroy your pictures. Yeah. Out in space, there are X-rays, gamma rays, alpha rays, cosmic radiations, cosmic bullets that travel at 2,000 kilometers per second. And the cameras have been out in the open without protection for up to 8 hours consecutive on the chest of the astronaut. So that film should be completely obliterated by radiation, by damage. There is no sign of damage whatsoever in those films. That, to me, is the one argument that kills them all. That film has never been outside the atmosphere. Had it been outside, it would be damaged by radiation.
I engaged ChatGPT on that point as well. And the,
Right,
answer, and the answer was, it was a special made film with special coating made by Kodak.
This is special bullshit. I'm sorry, ChatGPT.
And they also went into the Hasselblad camera, and I saw one of your interviews this afternoon. You've actually worked with that thing. That's a special camera, and you've used it.
Yeah, but there was nothing special. The only difference was they painted silver to reflect the light and the heat. That's all they did. And they took away the oil from the mechanism, because the oil would, in the vacuum, it would boil. So they made a different kind of lubricant. They used a different kind of lubricant. That's all the difference there was. Yeah. There's no way to stop cosmic radiation. Like there is no way to stop X-rays. When you go to take your X-rays, the doctor has a thick, and they put over you also, parts of your body, they put out a thick lead surface like this to protect from radiation. None of that is happening in the Hasselblad cameras. The Hasselblad cameras are just what they are. It's a box of tin, basically, made of aluminum. Very light, very sturdy, but very light. That should have killed the film. There's no way that it would have preserved the film. And yet, the pictures are immaculate. There's not one dent of radiation on that film.
I'm a musician also, so the point of... and actually, we're recording this with an annoying echo that I try to filter out afterwards. Brings me to what was happening with the audio between Earth and the Moon. It takes 1.3 seconds for audio to get there and then to come back. You have to at least wait for 2 point so many seconds. And there was an audio
2.6.
fragment that is 1.1 second long, and the answer was there already. ChatGPT said, yeah, that was due to the DVD editing that was done. So yeah, you
Accept
can.
it.
But
That answer, see, ChatGPT, how does it work? It goes and check all the websites from the bunkers.
Mhm.
The debunkers tell you that the DVD was edited, and ChatGPT just repeats that.
Yeah.
Except it's not true, because the DVDs I used are the original NASA DVDs that were sold as unedited. It said it. They're unedited. They're untouched. And also, I only found 3 spots where the answer is shorter than 2.6 seconds out of hours and hours of dialogue recording. Why would anybody remove half a second only in 3 particular moments and not in the whole? If you want to do editing and you want to make a conversation more quick, you remove all the pauses. But all the pauses are there,
I prepared.
except for those 3 examples.
I encourage people to see the whole thing. It's 3.5 hours long.
Yeah.
Do it and make up your own mind and be your own journalist. But I prepared a clip from America Moon that goes into this example to give you a little taste of what's going on.
Let's now take a closer look at the telecommunications between Earth and the Moon. There are several elements that don't add up in this area, like, for example, the delay in the radio communications between Houston and the astronauts. The Earth and the Moon are about 240,000 miles apart. For this reason, a radio signal takes about 1.3 seconds to reach our satellite and another 1.3 seconds to come back to Earth. This means that when Houston asked a question to the astronauts on the Moon, the reply should have taken at least 2.6 seconds to come back to Earth. 1.3 seconds for the question to reach the astronaut, 1.3 seconds for his answer to come back. There are some cases, however, where the answer from the astronaut comes back much faster. Here is one example.
Roger, Jim, copy. And are you progressing towards Dune Crater now?
Yep.
The answer is almost immediate. It takes a little over a second for it to come back.
Roger, Jim, copy. And are you progressing towards Dune Crater now?
Yep.
So again, I encourage people to go watch that thing. What's also in there is a fragment that you borrowed from another film, I believe. Jan Lundberg, who developed the actual camera. Did you reach out to Hasselblad with questions as a filmmaker?
Not myself. I took that clip from another film called, I think it's called Something Happened on the Moon, or I don't remember the title. It's a film made by David Percy, a British researcher. And they went to Lundberg and they showed him the most famous picture of all, which is Armstrong Aldrin on the moon, standing a little bit sideways, with the helmet with the reflection of the lamp. Everybody uses that picture. And if you look in the background on the ground, there's a spot of lighter around where he is. And then the more you get away, the darker it gets. And that is a classic example of when you use a spotlight. The spotlight is lighter where it hits the ground, but it cannot cover, like the sun would, the entire ground behind.
There is no reason why this area should appear darker than this one. This area darker than this one, or this area darker than this one. As we have seen before, when the sun illuminates a large expanse of land, its light reaches every visible point with the same intensity. If we use an artificial light instead, the illuminated area becomes brighter in the center and ever more dark as we move towards the edges. A blatant case of hotspot is found in one of the most famous pictures from NASA. This shot of Buzz Aldrin taken by Neil Armstrong during the Apollo 11 mission. Here, the difference on the terrain is already visible to the naked eye, but it becomes absolutely evident for everybody after we increase the contrast. An opinion on this picture was asked of Jan Lundberg, the Hasselblad technician responsible for providing NASA with the cameras for the Apollo missions. When shown the Aldrin picture, Lundberg had to acknowledge, with some embarrassment, that the image seems to have been shot under a movie light, and was unable to provide a valid explanation for that.
Yes, it seems like he's standing in the spotlight. And I can't explain that. That escapes me. Why? So maybe you have to find Armstrong and ask him.
So they went to Lundberg and said, don't you see that? Does it seem that this astronaut is sitting in a spotlight? And Lundberg says, yes, it does seem like a spotlight. And I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, what he also said is you should ask Armstrong. Now, Armstrong,
Yeah. He said, should ask Armstrong.
he passed away. Collins
Yeah.
was alive when you created a documentary, and Buzz Aldrin is still alive. Did you reach
Yes.
out to any of the...
No. Absolutely not. Also, in the case of, for example, the last sequence that shows Patsy Brell, a researcher, trying to have them swear on the Bible they went to the moon, that is taken directly from the documentary of Patsy Brell.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Also, because at this point, any Buzz Aldrin would totally buzz me off completely, would not even want to answer my questions because he already knows why I'm coming. So there would be no point now to go and interview them.
So the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, and the most powerful man of, at least for now, the most powerful country in the world, Donald Trump, are staking their reputation on going to Mars. While the likes of you, and me talking to you, are claiming that we never even went to the moon. I was surprised that your documentary is still up on YouTube, but do you envision backlash coming or censorship or what have you on this?
No, because there's a lot of so-called moon hoax documentaries. I mean, mine is very well done. I know that it's very complete, but it's not the only one. There are a lot of people who fight the same battle that I fight, and they started even before me. Patsy Brell, I just mentioned, Jara White in Australia, David Percy in England, Gerard Wisniewski in Germany. I don't know of any Dutch person actually, but there might be. So the moon hoax research has been going on forever. So there's no point in attacking me or my documentary because there are hundreds of others that say basically the same thing. So I don't think any problem. I don't see any problem with that. They count. See, that NASA counts on the fact that most people are. They don't believe the fact that they would not ever believe the fact that we didn't go to the moon. Like the quotation says, it's much easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. So that is, I think, their secret.
Don't you feel there's a change in the air though? People are more critical to governments.
Absolutely. As I said, even myself, 6 years ago, I was mockery in public media, in Italian media, because of that. Now, much less. Now, also on the UFOs. I made a documentary on UFOs 15 years ago, in 2008. At the time, Bazooka believes in UFOs, and now that everybody's talking about UFOs much more seriously, nobody even makes fun of me anymore. They just consider that a very realistic possibility. So yes, times are changing very quickly.
In closing, what would you say to Trump or Musk or to the audience now that you have their attention?
I would say to Trump, get rid of Musk. I wouldn't say anything to Musk because he wouldn't listen. But I would say to Trump, get rid of him. He's more bad than good, I think, in the bottom line.
Do you think Musk believes we went to the moon?
No. The reason why they would do this publicity is because they can bring in millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, that they can be used then for something else. Even the NASA operation, the Apollo operation, all this money that was spent to go to the moon, if you think we did not go to the moon, so we saved a lot of the money, not all of it. Some of it was used. They helped to build the Saturn. But a lot of money was not really used to go to the moon. It was used to do something else. So any big project in general, when you have a big government, any big project you can bring to a government means a lot of money for you. And then it's up to your ability to juggle that money and do whatever you want with it. So Musk may very well say, I need a $3 trillion project to go to Mars. And they'll give it to him. And then they already agreed that out of those $3 trillion, he keeps, 300 million. And the rest goes to the Pentagon for other black operations that they cannot officially admit they're doing. It's called Black Ops for a reason, because they're black. They're not known.
Okay,
So-
but you have to end on a positive note. So you're talking to a podcast that's named after a candle. Kaars in Dutch is candle. So what would be your positive closing note then to the audience?
I'm
If any.
sorry. I'm
Positive.
talking to a
Yeah, but the podcast is called Podkaars.
Oh, you want
That's Dutch.
a positive note.
Yeah, please.
I think everything we said is positive, because when you denounce the lies, it's positive. It's a good path towards the truth. So everything we do, everything we say, at least everything what I do and try to say and try to do, is for the best. By killing the lies, by removing the lies, the layers of lies, you get to the truth. So it's all positive.
Exactly.
Even though you have to criticize somebody, but the result is positive.
Thank you so much for this conversation. Massimo Mazzucco.
Thank you and ciao. I don't know how to say. I only know one bad word in Dutch, so I'm not going to repeat that.
Ciao is good. Thank you so much. Bye
That's
bye.
good enough.
Het gaat hier vandaag over saamhorigheid.
We zien dingen verschillend. We hebben allebei wel gelijk. Als we verder willen. En ik gewoon van jouw kant bekijk. Als ik daar zie wat jij ziet. Respect is waar het begint. Als we dat kunnen houden. Wat sterker is, wint.